Bill Harris here, and I'm absolutely livid. The Trump administration just weaponized the State Department to sanction European officials and anti-disinformation experts for allegedly censoring Americans. We're talking visa bans, potential deportations, and threats of more to come. This isn't foreign policy. This is authoritarian retaliation against people fighting hate speech and disinformation. Let's break down this insanity. And I'm going to play a little video for you right now just to show you the whole scale of this controversy.
Visa sanctions on a former EU commissioner, Thierry Breton, and 4 other people trying to make American tech companies police political speech. In a post on X, Breton responded to that the European law was voted with a broad-based support, writing, quote, "To our American friends, censorship isn't where you think it is." The State Department also targeted activists and nonprofits focused on digital hate speech and countering extremism.
Sorry about the lack of information in that clip. That was the only video I could find at the time of making this. Anyway, so yesterday, December 23rd, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the State Department is imposing visa sanctions on 5 people, not governments, not countries, individual people, Europeans who work on internet safety and disinformation. Let me read you exactly what CNN reported. According to CNN, the U.S. State Department on Tuesday imposed visa sanctions on a former top European Union official and employees of organizations that combat disinformation for alleged censorship, sharply ratcheting up the Trump administration's fight against European regulations that have impacted digital platforms, far-right politicians, and Trump allies, including Elon Musk. So who are these 5 dangerous censors that America needs to ban? Let me tell you. First, Thierry Breton. He's a former European commissioner who was instrumental in creating the Digital Services Act, the EU law that requires big tech platforms to take down illegal content and protect users. That's it. That's his crime. He made Facebook and X follow basic safety rules. Second, Imran Ahmed, CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. His organization researches hate speech and disinformation online. They publish reports. They do advocacy. They don't have any power to take down content. They just document it. Third, Claire Melford, CEO of the Global Disinformation Index. Again, a research organization that tracks disinformation. They don't censor anyone. They analyze content. Fourth and fifth, Josephine Balan and Annalena von Hodenberg, leaders of Hate Aid, a German organization that helps victims of online hate and harassment. These are the people Marco Rubio just declared are threats to American foreign policy. Researchers, advocates, people trying to make the internet safer. Now let me read you what Rubio said in his official statement. From CNN, Rubio accused the 5 sanctioned people of leading organized efforts to coerce American platforms to censor, demonetize, and suppress American viewpoints they oppose. Organized efforts to coerce. That's the language. As if these people have some kind of power to force Meta or X to do anything. They don't. They publish research. They advocate for policy changes. That's it. But wait, it gets worse. According to CNN, Rubio determined that their entry, presence, or activities in the United States have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. Foreign policy consequences. From a guy who runs an organization that studies hate speech. Think about how absurd that is. And then Rubio threatens more sanctions. From CNN, the State Department stands ready and willing to expand today's list if other foreign actors do not reverse course. So this is just the beginning. They're threatening anyone in Europe who works on content moderation or disinformation research. Fall in line, or you're banned from America. Now let's talk about why this is really happening. Because it's not about censorship. It's about protecting Elon Musk and his ability to run X however he wants without European oversight. Thierry Breton, the main target of these sanctions, has repeatedly clashed with Musk over the Digital Services Act. Let me read you what CNN reported. Breton has repeatedly clashed with Musk over the Digital Services Act. In August 2024, Breton told Musk in a letter, ahead of an interview with Donald Trump, that he must comply with the regulation. So Breton sent Musk a letter reminding him that X has to follow EU law. That's his job. He was the commissioner responsible for digital services. And for that, he's now banned from entering the United States. The U.S. Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Sarah Rogers, made this connection explicit. According to CNN, Rogers specifically referenced that letter in a post on X Tuesday, accusing Breton of having ominously reminded Musk of X's legal obligations and ongoing formal proceedings for alleged noncompliance with illegal content and disinformation requirements under the DSA. Ominously reminded. She's characterizing a regulatory compliance letter as ominous, as if telling a company it needs to follow the law is some kind of threat. This is the Trump administration openly using the power of the State Department to protect Elon Musk's business interests. Musk doesn't want to follow European content moderation rules because it would require him to actually police hate speech and disinformation on X. So Trump's State Department bans the people trying to enforce those rules. And by the way, Elon Musk is one of Trump's biggest supporters. He's been advising Trump. He's been using X to amplify Trump's messaging. This isn't a coincidence. This is quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I'll use the State Department to intimidate your critics. This is retaliation, pure and simple. You published research that made Trump's cabinet pick look bad, so now you're sanctioned. That's authoritarian behavior. And Claire Melford's organization, the Global Disinformation Index, was targeted because, according to CNN, Rogers accused the organization of using U.S. taxpayer money to extort censorship and blacklisting of American speech and press. Now, I looked into this. GDI received some grant funding that included U.S. sources. They used that money to do research on which websites spread disinformation and which ones are reliable. News organizations and advertisers use that research to decide where to place ads. Nobody's being censored. Nobody's being blacklisted. It's just research. But because some of that research found that certain right-wing outlets spread more disinformation than mainstream sources, the Trump administration is calling it censorship. They're saying that identifying disinformation is itself censorship of conservative viewpoints. Think about the implication there. They're equating disinformation with conservative views. They're saying that calling out lies is political bias. And I want to take a minute to explain what the Digital Services Act actually is, because the Trump administration is characterizing it as some kind of censorship regime, and that's just not true. The DSA is EU legislation that requires large online platforms to take responsibility for illegal content on their services. We're talking about things like terrorist content, hate speech that incites violence, and harassment. The law requires platforms to have systems in place to remove this content when it's reported. It also requires transparency. Platforms have to publish reports on what content they're removing and why. They have to explain their algorithms. They have to allow researchers access to data for public interest research. That's it. That's the censorship the Trump administration is so worked up about, requiring Facebook and X to take down terrorist recruitment videos and to be transparent about how they moderate content. No legitimate free speech advocate has a problem with this. The only people who have a problem with the DSA are the tech companies who don't want regulatory oversight and the far-right figures who benefit from unmoderated platforms where they can spread disinformation without consequence. And guess what? The DSA works. Since it went into effect, we've seen platforms actually start removing more harmful content. We've seen more transparency. We've seen researchers able to study how misinformation spreads. But Trump doesn't want that. He wants platforms to be completely unregulated so that his lies and his allies' lies can spread without any fact-checking or moderation. So now he's using the State Department to punish the people who created and enforce these protections. Let me read you what CNBC reported about Breton's response. From CNBC, in a social media post on Tuesday, Breton questioned, "Is McCarthy's witch hunt back?" referencing the late senator's Cold War-era inquisition of alleged communists who he claimed had infiltrated American government institutions. He's comparing this to McCarthyism. And you know what? He's right. That's exactly what this is. The Trump administration is creating an enemies list of people who disagree with them and using government power to punish them. That's not American. That's authoritarian. So how are the people being sanctioned responding to this? They're speaking out, and they're not backing down. The Global Disinformation Index issued a statement that CNN quoted. In a statement to CNN, a spokesperson for GDI said that the sanctions amounted to an authoritarian attack on free speech and an egregious act of government censorship. The Trump administration is, once again, using the full weight of the federal government to intimidate, censor, and silence voices they disagree with. Their actions today are immoral, unlawful, and un-American. Read that again. They're calling the Trump administration's actions an authoritarian attack on free speech and government censorship. And they're absolutely right. The Trump administration is accusing these organizations of censorship while actively using government power to silence them. The projection is staggering. The leaders of Hate Aid, the German organization, also responded. According to CNN, Ballin and von Hodenberg said, "We will not be intimidated by a government that uses accusations of censorship to silence those who stand up for human rights and freedom of expression. Despite the significant strain and restrictions placed on us and our families by U.S. government measures, we will continue our work with all our strength, now more than ever. We stand in solidarity with all those affected, and with all those who now fear similar measures. These people are facing visa bans that affect not just them but their families. They're being targeted by the most powerful government on earth, and they're still standing up and saying they won't be silenced. That takes courage." And Thierry Breton, according to CNBC, posted on X, "To our American friends, censorship isn't where you think it is." He's turning it around. He's saying, look at what your government is doing. They're the ones engaging in censorship. They're the ones punishing speech they don't like. And he's right. Think about this for a second. The Trump administration claims to be defending free speech, but they're sanctioning people for publishing research. They're sanctioning people for advocating for policy changes. They're sanctioning people for doing exactly what the First Amendment protects: speaking, writing, researching, and petitioning for changes they believe in. That's what free speech actually is. And the Trump administration is punishing it. This isn't happening in a vacuum. This is part of a broader Trump administration campaign against anyone who works on content moderation, disinformation research, or online safety. Let me read you what CNN reported about J.D. Vance's position on this. From CNN. In February, Vice President J.D. Vance used one of his first major speeches after taking office to criticize what he described as censorship efforts in Europe in a speech delivered at the Munich Security Conference. He claimed that leaders had threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation, citing the example of the COVID-19 lab leak theory. So Vance is claiming that attempts to combat misinformation about COVID are censorship. He's saying that when platforms removed dangerous health misinformation that was literally killing people, that was bullying. And notice his language, so-called misinformation. He's putting scare quotes around the word. He's suggesting that the concept of misinformation itself is illegitimate, that there's no such thing as false information that should be corrected. CNN continued with Vance's quote, "It looks more and more like old entrenched interest, hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion." Soviet-era words. He's comparing efforts to combat disinformation to Soviet propaganda. The irony is unbelievable. The Soviet Union suppressed factual information and spread lies to control the population. That's exactly what Trump and Vance are doing. They're trying to eliminate the concept of truth itself so they can say whatever they want without any accountability. This is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Step 1. Attack the idea that truth exists. Step 2. Claim that anyone who fact-checks you is the real censor. Step 3. Use government power to punish your critics. And it's not just Europe. The Trump administration has also been attacking American researchers and organizations that study disinformation. They've been threatening universities that receive federal funding if they do research on misinformation. They've been cutting funding to programs that combat online extremism. This is a coordinated assault on the entire field of trust and safety research. They want to make it impossible for anyone to study or combat disinformation because they benefit from a post-truth environment where facts don't matter. Now let's talk about whether what the Trump administration is doing is even legal, because I have serious doubts. The State Department has authority to deny visas to people who pose threats to national security or foreign policy interests. That's true. But can they really claim that a researcher who publishes reports about hate speech is a threat to U.S. foreign policy? I'm not a lawyer, but this seems like a massive stretch of that authority. These sanctions are being imposed not because these people have done anything to harm the United States, but because they've advocated for policies that the Trump administration doesn't like. That's viewpoint discrimination. That's the government punishing speech based on the content of that speech. And that's supposed to be unconstitutional. Now, these are foreign nationals, so they don't have the same First Amendment protections as U.S. citizens. But there are still limits on how the government can discriminate in visa decisions. You can't deny someone a visa just because you don't like their political views, especially when those views are expressed through legal advocacy and research. I think these sanctions are legally dubious at best. But here's the problem. Who's going to challenge them? These are individuals with limited resources going up against the U.S. government. The legal fees alone would be astronomical, and even if they won, it would take years. So Trump gets what he wants. These people are banned now, they're intimidated now, and the chilling effect happens now. Even if the sanctions get overturned eventually, the damage is done. And that's the point. This isn't about following the law. This is about using the threat of government punishment to silence critics. It's about making an example out of these 5 people so that everyone else working in this field knows. If you cross us, we'll come after you too. Remember what Rubio said in his statement? According to CNN, the State Department stands ready and willing to expand today's list if other foreign actors do not reverse course. That's a threat. Do what we want or you're next. That's how authoritarians operate. Let me tell you why I'm so angry about this, and why you should be too. This is the United States government using its power to protect disinformation, not to combat it, to protect it. They're sanctioning the people trying to make the internet safer and more truthful, and they're doing it to benefit tech billionaires and politicians who profit from lies. We're living through a moment where one of our major political parties has decided that truth itself is the enemy. They don't want fact-checkers. They don't want researchers. They don't want anyone who might point out when they're lying. So they're systematically dismantling the infrastructure that identifies and combats disinformation, and the consequences are going to be catastrophic. We're already seeing vaccine-preventable diseases make comebacks because of anti-vax misinformation. We're seeing political violence incited by conspiracy theories. We're seeing people make terrible decisions about their health, their finances, their lives, because they've been fed lies online. And the Trump administration's response is to go after the people trying to fix it. They're making the problem worse, deliberately, because they benefit from a population that can't tell truth from fiction. This is also about America's relationship with our allies. We just sanctioned officials and citizens of our closest allies, France, Germany, the UK, for doing their jobs. We're telling Europe, your laws don't matter, your sovereignty doesn't matter. If you do anything that inconveniences American tech companies or American politicians, we'll punish you. That's not how alliances work. That's how empires treat colonies. And Europe is rightfully pissed off about it. According to CNBC, European leaders on Wednesday condemned these sanctions. We're damaging relationships with our democratic allies to protect Elon Musk's ability to run X however he wants. That's insane. And here's what really gets me. The Trump administration is doing all of this while claiming to defend free speech. They've wrapped themselves in First Amendment rhetoric while actively suppressing speech they don't like. It's Orwellian. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Censorship is free speech. I'm furious. I'm furious that they think we're stupid enough to fall for this. I'm furious that they're using government power to protect lies. I'm furious that they're attacking people who are trying to make the world better. And I'm furious that this is probably just the beginning. Rubio said they're ready to expand the list. How many more researchers, advocates, and officials are they going to sanction? How far is this going to go? We need to be paying attention to this. We need to be speaking out about it. Because if we let them get away with this, it's only going to get worse. Today it's Europeans they're sanctioning. Tomorrow it could be American academics. It could be journalists. It could be anyone who publishes research or reporting that makes the administration look bad. This is a test. They're seeing how much they can get away with. And if we don't push back, they'll take it as permission to go further. So here's what I want you to do. Share this video. Talk about this story. Don't let it get buried in the news cycle. Contact your representatives and tell them this is unacceptable. Support organizations that fight disinformation and protect online safety. And most importantly, don't let them gaslight you into thinking that combating lies is censorship. It's not. Censorship is what the Trump administration is doing right now, using government power to silence critics and protect disinformation. That's censorship, and we need to call it what it is. This is Bill Harris. I'm absolutely furious, and I'm not letting this go. Subscribe, share this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed. Stay angry.